Hello and welcome to the Cowboy Chronicles, the Oklahoman's Oklahoma State football podcast. I am your host, Scott Wright, joined once again for 2 out of 3 weeks.
Didn't get fired yet.
You have not got fired yet. Marshall Scott of Pistols Firing, PFB, and all of the above.
Yep.
Marshall, when we sat down here at Stone Cloud, Manic Monday was the song playing overhead. And it has been that. Here we are Monday afternoon, and it has been a manic Monday for us.
Yeah, a little rainy. I don't want to get into anybody's medical situation. A little bit of a situation in the press box after Gundy's press conference.
Right.
It's Steve Lutz today. It's the third time that he's been available to Oklahoma State media, so that was a lot of fun. And then we got practice after this. It has been a manic Monday. And on top of that, team didn't play very well on Saturday, so it makes everything a little bit more hectic.
Exactly. Mike Gundy had some sort of appointment that knocked our schedule off. We talked to him 15 minutes earlier than usual, and very hard out at the end of the day. It's been a very unique day. Absolutely. All the way around. But we're back at Stone Cloud, getting to relax and hang out for just a little bit. And your second time to get to choose a Stone Cloud beer. What'd you go with this week, Marshall?
I went with the Stone Cloud Light.
Excellent choice.
Yeah, after my first time that weekend, I went and picked up some Neon Sunshine cans for my football Sunday. So, maybe the same thing will happen. Maybe it'll happen again.
I'm a big fan, my girlfriend in particular, very big fan of Stone Cloud.
I'll try to not take that as a slight, but
I did not. She is a fan of beer in general. Not that. Don't take that as a slight at all. I'm going with Excalibur. An Imperial IPA, which wasn't my original choice, but I got talked into it. I'm very easy to talk into things.
Believe we stayed at the Excalibur in Vegas.
That is correct.
So
this is just like being back
more
in Vegas,
synergy,
right
absolutely.
Here. Unimpressed with the hotel of the Excalibur.
Yeah,
but it was also $108 a night in Vegas. So
I was a little. My room was on like the second floor, so I was like, I'm gonna have this big grandiose view of Vegas. It was just a wall outside so that was all that I've got to say about it. But Vegas was Vegas nonetheless.
I actually had a great view out of mine. I don't remember what floor I was on, but I had the Pyramid next door, Mandalay Bay. You could kind of see the Vegas sign down the strip from where I was at.
I need to get with your guy on booking things, I guess.
Exactly. As always, if you're on YouTube, jump in the comments. Go put in your score prediction for Oklahoma State, Kansas State, up in Manhattan, Kansas this week. Marshall, no winners on the selection. Everybody picked Oklahoma State. No Utah selections, as opposed to a week earlier, actually 2 weeks earlier, when we had the Arkansas podcast. It got infiltrated by Hog fans, and the vast majority had picked Arkansas to win that game. Only a few Oklahoma State fans, and obviously had a winner that week. But
not only were they wrong, they were very wrong this week.
Yes,
it was a 3-point game, but it wasn't actually a 3-point game.
No, it's really weird to cover a game that ends that close and feel like a team got blown out of the water and dominated entirely. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but. Go throw in your OSU K-State predictions down in the comments, and hopefully you can win a beer that we'll drink for you next week. So with that, we'll start very broad, just kind of top-line thoughts coming out of the Utah loss for Oklahoma State.
Yeah, I think a lot has been made, and whenever you make a quarterback change, that's going to be the big talking point. A lot's been made about that. I think the real underlying issues are in Oklahoma State's run game. They've got to figure out a way to get the ball rolling. I know Mike Gundy said, they're playing with too many people in the box. Whenever that happens, you've got to throw the ball. I just think that there's got to be some, I don't know if creativity is the right word. You don't want to, I think it's been dubbed the Ollie Cat, Ollie handing off to Brendan Presley. Right. That's probably not sustainable for long chunks of period of time, but that's the type of creativity that I think Oklahoma State needs to accept because, through 4 weeks, this run game has been horrible. You get the run game going a little bit, that's going to open up so much for Alan Bowman, so much for those receivers, I think. But right now, Oklahoma State is being made to play one-dimensional, and I think that's smart by opposing teams whenever, the reigning Doak Walker winner's back there. So I think those are where the big issues lie. Obviously, the quarterback thing was kind of shocking just to see because that's not something Gundy does a ton. To see Garrett Rangel out there, see him play for 4 series, seeing them go back to Bowman. I think it opened itself up to Sunday morning quarterback discussion, which Gundy said today that's what he is, a Sunday morning quarterback with his staff. So, I think hindsight's 20/20 on how that should have been handled, but it seemed like maybe they went to the wrong guy. We asked about Flores today, not getting a ton of reps in practice. I see that reasoning as to why he wouldn't get put in the game, but there's so many ways you can go with Alan Bowman's situation, but yeah, just offensive struggles in general was my big takeaway. But I think it really starts with the running game.
It absolutely does, and until they can actually be productive and make teams fear that in some way, teams are now, especially after last weekend, are going to come and say, your quarterback's going to have to beat us.
Yeah.
We don't care about the receivers. We'll go one-on-one with whoever you want to put out there. Your quarterback is going to have to beat us, and they're going to wait and see if he has a game like he had against Utah or a game like he had against Tulsa, where he seemed like he couldn't miss anything. Obviously, Tulsa, they won a bunch of one-on-one battles at receiver. That's not going to be the case in the vast majority of Big 12 games. I was with you in that with the quarterback change starting the second half. It felt surprising because Gundy doesn't do that a lot.
Yeah.
And it also felt like if you were going to do that, that wasn't really one where I would have expected him to, because Bowman's had a lot of bad first halves, or the offense has, and Bowman had a bad first half against Arkansas, came back and was spectacular in the second half. It just felt like you were sort of waiting for that shoe to drop, and instead they go to Rangel, and he struggles 3 for 11, 31 yards, missed a couple of wide open guys, and they end up going back to Bowman. I really sort of thought Flores was going to get his shot there, but like you mentioned, Gundy says that he hasn't had the level of practice snaps during the week on Tuesday and Wednesday for them to really feel comfortable with what they're asking him to do. And I do get that. Last year, while he's redshirting, he's the fourth guy. They're trying to get 1, 2, and 3 all of their reps. There was nothing left over for him last year. Spring, I'm sure they balanced it out all pretty good, but in terms of actual game planning week to week, he's probably not seeing the entire run of the playbook. The thing that I did think was interesting, and Gundy didn't directly call out Casey Dunn, but they did have the new package that we saw where they would bunch a set of receivers way over wide on one side or the other. You mentioned the Ollie Cat that they also ran on that same drive. And it felt like they were running some of those plays to set up something else for later. And they never came back around to it.
Later never came.
No, and that really surprised me because it felt sort of like last year. It was right around this time when they unveiled all the like loop motions and all of those with Brennan Presley, all the different things they started doing with him. Felt like that was going to be like a new staple of the playbook, and they just never went back to it. And Gundy kind of pointed out, he said it was sticking with his mom's theory. If those plays worked the first drive, why didn't you keep running those? There's definitely some truth to that, and I'm not. I don't go as far as some of the anti-Casey Dunn folks like to go on the internet in particular, but they definitely did not adjust well to what they were seeing and take advantage of what was working. My initial thought when I saw that package where they would send like a bunch of receivers way out to the right or way out to the left was trying to pull a guy out eventually, trying to get an extra guy out to help, or offload one side of the secondary to make them move around and do some things differently. And I kept waiting to see what the next evolution of all of that was as kind of the chess game between coordinators, and it just never came. And so that was very odd to me.
And it'd be one thing if Ollie wasn't, he's a big dude. It'd be one thing if he wasn't a threat in the receiving game. But there was a Kansas game, I think last year, he had north of 100 receiving yards. So it's like, if you're not getting the ball in space on the inside, handing him the ball off, like, just put him out there. Like, and again, this is all very easy for us to say whenever we don't. And I don't think that Oklahoma State had a firm idea going into that game that it was going to be so difficult for them to move the ball. Because they just came out of Tulsa, everything was great. So it's not like you're ready to just totally turn on a dime like that. But yeah, it was weird to see such creativity in one drive. And I think a lot of those plays were, because they went 3 and out right off the rip, I think a lot of those plays were just the script, those first 15, 20 plays that offensive coordinators have. But it was weird to see that if that was the script, that the script was so much different from just like the normal every down thing. So yeah, I think if you're questioning play calling, I think Mike Gundy's, to an extent today, also said that he was questioning some things that went on there today. So I think that's well justified. But yeah, it's a rough thing. And like I said, I think it just really starts with they've got to run the ball, and then everything is going to feel so much easier off of that.
All right, scenario time. Let's say we're 3 weeks from now. Things go somewhat smoothly between here and there, but in the 3 weeks from now, let's say at BYU, Bowman goes and has another 8 for 22 first half, throws a pick. They're in a miserable situation, and Gundy decides he needs a relief pitcher.
Yeah.
I guess for Gundy, I got to do it like this,
the-
right? That's how he does his quotes. Gundy needs a relief pitcher. Is Rangel the guy still?
Yeah, I don't think so. And
either.
that stinks. I like Rangel. You like Rangel. Great kid. It just hasn't necessarily worked out. And we were kind of talking before this. I think he's been thrown into just ridiculous situations.
Absolutely.
He plays his true freshman year in 2022 after Spencer Sanders gets hurt. I'd assume he thought there was no way that he was playing that year. He goes. His first start is in Kansas, in Lawrence, playing a Kansas team that is a win away from bowl eligibility for the first time since 2008. Then all of a sudden he's playing in a monsoon against West Virginia. Then he's playing in that bowl game where everybody's slipping and sliding around. And then the next year he gets put in a 3-quarterback rotation. And, that was what it was. Certainly
Right.
wasn't good. I think he got sick going into the South Alabama game. They lose that game, and Gundy says, hey, this is a horrible idea that everybody else was kind of saying it was a horrible idea way before that.
Yeah, right.
So they scrap. But I think going into that game, I was like, I think I feel the best about Garrett Rangel among these three.
Right.
But he doesn't get to play a ton in that game. You scrap it, and then you just kind of go with what everybody I think thought was going to happen in Alan Bowman being the guy.
Right.
So I think he's been put in a ton of tough spots. They weren't able to move the ball at all against Utah before he got in. Then they put him in, and guess what? They still weren't able to move the ball. So,
Right.
But I just think that so much stuff has happened with Garrett Rangel, and then if they really do think Flores is the guy, and Gundy said back at fall camp that he thinks he's ready.
Right.
So if that is the case, I just don't, in this transfer portal era, see a way that you can put Rangel back on the field if you really do feel as good as we think that they feel about Zane Flores.
Another similar question, but going a little farther ahead. You think both these guys are still in OSU uniforms in spring?
I think, and I've thought this even going into the year, that I think at least one of them is gone. I don't think there's a world where you keep both of those guys. And even like looking at Utah, is kind of crazy that their backup was a true freshman. But that I think is just pretty standard for college football right now.
Right.
Because quarterbacks aren't staying in one spot very long. I think it's unique that Oklahoma State's got these three guys, and they've got Im Smith, Maileiwaki.
Well done.
And it's just,
we'll call it right.
And then Smith.
Yeah.
So I think that's a bit of a unique thing that they've been able to keep 3 consecutive quarterbacks that they've recruited in-house. But yeah, I think the whoever the guy that doesn't win this battle, I think is probably gone. And then if you mess around too much, if they keep putting Rangel in and it keeps not going well, then I think you risk Flores going. So. For all of those reasons, I think it's kind of just time to commit to one of those guys. And if they're watching practice, if they think that Rangel is head and shoulders better than Flores, maybe that's the case.
Right.
Then I guess that you keep sticking with them. But I just personally think that past this time, I think they're going to probably move on to Zane Flores moving forward.
That's how it feels to me, and I think assuming that Flores gets some legitimate playing time at some point this year and has success. Rangel seems like it would be the natural move for him to leave. But
maybe I don't know Garrett personally. Maybe he just loves Stillwater. Maybe so. Maybe he'll stick around.
Yeah.
But just based on quarterbacks and their movement, I wouldn't think that he'd stick past this year if he doesn't win the job.
Exactly. I would agree with that, and it's a little bit too bad because I would like to see Rangel, Flores, Smith. If he's ready to be in that battle next spring, battling it out for the job. But
would you like to see a 3-quarterback rotation at the beginning of next year?
I would not.
Okay.
No. I say like August 25th at least. Let's have one guy that's your starter and let us all write about him and tell the world how great he's going to be. One of the toughest things to explain. I'm sure you've run into this some too. We can talk to people and find out what practice looks like, but I've legitimately seen Zane Flores throw 5 passes.
Yeah.
And none of them with a defensive line coming at him.
Yeah.
So I have no idea what type of player he actually is, and I don't feel like I'm getting necessarily great information in terms of somebody who understands the decision making that's going on in practice. I think he's very physically talented. I'm sure that he has some amazing plays, and it sounds like he has based on information that I hear. But you know, if he's making horrible decisions and getting away with stuff or whatever it is, it's like we don't. It's so impossible for us to know how good this kid actually is.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe something that like readers and fans of the team that we cover don't necessarily understand. They're like, why aren't you just trumpeting the Zane Flores? And it's like,
right.
Well, I've seen his high school highlights.
Yes.
And then, you know, I've heard that he's pretty good. And I thought it was interesting that Mike Gundy went out on that limb during media day and said he's
right.
ready. And that's like not something that Mike Gundy does a ton, but in the transfer portal era, you just wonder, is that to appease, you know,
right.
So there's that political aspect to it. So yeah, it's very hard for us to just be like, you know what, Zane Flores should play, but we've not seen him play in an Oklahoma State uniform, so right. I don't. That's a tough thing just in writing in general, because people are like, why don't you, you know, yeah. Why aren't you writing more about Zane Flores needing to be the guy? And it's like, right. Well, you know, maybe I think that moving forward, but like, I don't know. I have no evidence to back this up with, and most of our job is evidence. Here it is.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, we're 15 minutes into this thing, and haven't talked about the defense at all. Not a lot really to say about the defense. I thought the defense had one of their better games.
Yeah.
You could argue statistically Tulsa was better, but I thought based on what they were facing, you know, they had the two big run plays that gashed them. The one over the top throw to Keith, the tight end, for the touchdown that ended up being a lot bigger than we realized at the time. But I thought start to finish, it was one of their better performances of the Brian Nardo era, really.
Yeah, I thought, you know, Trey Rucker in particular, I think at halftime he had 9 tackles and 2 interceptions. And it's like, somebody help this guy play football.
Right.
But yeah, I thought, you know, run fits, it was outside of those 2 rushes was a lot better. I'm trying not to get, just like I'm trying not to get too poo-pooed on what the offense did, because, you know, last year they turned this around. I'm trying not to overreact. This is a good Utah team. In that same way, I'm trying not to think too highly of the Oklahoma State defense because they played well against a true freshman quarterback.
Right.
But at the same time, it's just based on where things were at the beginning of the year, kind of the run gashes that they were giving up, particularly against Arkansas. So much. It seemed like that you can see this team, that unit anyways, taking steps forward kind of week by week. There was a little bit more going into the year to figure out new defensive linemen playing around. You've got Kendall Daniels playing linebacker now. You had Colin Oliver. Now you don't have Colin Oliver. So there's kind of a lot that they had to figure out. But I think you can see them progressing as, you know, you'd like to see throughout a year. And then Trey Rucker in particular had 100 tackles last year. We basically didn't talk about him just because, you know, Nick Martin's got 140 tackles or whatever. And then Kendall Daniels is doing what he's doing. Colin Oliver still existed, you know, so in a way, Trey Rucker was kind of the forgotten man.
Yeah.
And, you know, I thought coming into the year that he'd probably have a pretty decent year, but not like the year he's having. He's been really good.
No, 3 games of over 14 tackles. Now, you mentioned the 2 picks, which that was the one thing that was still a little bit of a concern was pass coverage with him. That was probably why we didn't talk about his tackles enough, because he was a guy chasing receivers down the field 10 yards behind him last year a little too often. But definitely he's playing better. Seems to understand his role much better this year and what is being asked of him. All that said about the defense, I think this is another big challenge this week because you've got a team that likes to run the ball, has a really talented running back, and a mobile quarterback. Now, they were miserably bad against BYU the other day, turned the ball over like crazy, and got smoked out there. But I think this could be a scary week because of what they can do, all the different ways they can hurt you, this Kansas State offense.
Yeah, absolutely. And running the ball, cutback lanes in particular against Arkansas were so bad. That's a matter of, you know, filling your gap. Didn't have great gap integrity against Arkansas, and that's going to be at a premium against Kansas State because Kansas State, throughout the years, whether it's Bill Snyder coaching or Chris Kleiman, that's a smart team. You know, they're going to do things, you know, the textbook way. And then, you've got Avery Johnson, who is actually 9th in the Big 12 in rushing, 10th in the Big 12 in rushing, Ollie Gordon. So Avery Johnson has ran for more yards this year than Ollie Gordon, and then DJ Giddens is even, you know, above those two. So, that's a scary thought, I'd imagine, if you're Oklahoma State defense, just because of, you know, the run game it's been a little dicey at times this year. Even that first series of the Tulsa game. You know, Tulsa was getting some decent gashes, and then they, you know, adjusted, figured it out, and went on from there. So yeah, I think that's definitely a big threat. And then it doesn't help the fact that the last time you were in that stadium, you lost 48-0, and it totally tanked the season. The 2022 season was just it was highs. We were in Fort Worth talking about, is this a playoff team?
Right.
And then those rumors of Spencer Sanders being hurt, and then all of a sudden Spencer Sanders played in that Kansas State game,
Yes.
and they still lost 48-0. So, I think there's a lot to be concerned about, but I think you do feel a little bit better that K-State went to Provo and just got dismantled.
Yeah, exactly. Tom Hutton ended his football career that day.
Yeah.
That was painful.
Yeah, Devin Wilbur, our photographer, has a lot of sad Tom Hutton pictures from that day because he's like crutching out of the stadium. It was pretty rough.
Yeah, that was a tough one. Really weird to think about that day. Well, it's weird thinking about it in the context of the last 3 weeks with this team, because I left the Arkansas game feeling like this was one of the weirdest games I've ever watched OSU play, and then I sort of left the stadium feeling that way Saturday again, and then I think back to that game when they were, what were they, 6th? They were top 10. I don't remember exactly, and get beat 48-0. Couldn't do anything. We've covered some weird games over the last several years with this ball club.
I was at a Halloween party the night before that K-State game that ended 48-0. So I drove from Stillwater. I think it was 11 a.m. kick. So I left it was dark whenever I left for Manhattan.
Wow.
And then I get there and I was like, I guess I'm still dreaming because what I'd seen before was just not happening on the football field. So definitely it feels like here lately, just about every other game has been perhaps the weirdest game of OSU football I've ever seen.
Yes, exactly. It's very bizarre. All right. Anything else about the Wildcats? I mean, really, the weirdest thing about this game in all is that it almost feels like an elimination game from the Big 12 title game race.
Yeah, I think the Big 12 is going to be so topsy-turvy. I think the fact that Kansas State lost, you maybe feel a little bit better about, like, hey, this league is going to be chaos. So, like, obviously, going into the year, I thought that they needed to split these two games, Utah and Kansas State. Win both, you're feeling outstanding. But I think split and you still feel pretty good. So that's still on the table, obviously. But then even past that, if they lose these two games, it's just been so upside down. UCF really good. BYU is BYU a player now.
Right.
People have been singing Rocco Beck's praises up in Ames. So I just generally think there's maybe 7-8 schools that have a legit shot at getting to Arlington. Utah certainly looks like they're in the prime seat for that right now. But another team's got to get there. So I'm intrigued to see who it's going to be, and I have no clue.
Yes, absolutely. Same. I'm right there with you. Okay, well, I said anything else, and then I gave you something else. So anything else about this game or Gundy today? That feels like so long ago that I can barely remember what he talked about.
Yeah, I don't think anything stood out too much. I think we hit on all the most parts. The quarterback situation. He's still saying too many people in the box. That's why the run's not happening. And then there's so much going on at Oklahoma State. I feel like I haven't had time to dive into Kansas State yet. So.
Exactly. Yeah. The one thing that does interest me is he said again today, which we heard a few times early last year. We don't need to change anything. We just need to do what we do better. Then, of course, they changed a lot of stuff last year. But part of that was you go from 3 quarterbacks to 1, you go from 3 running backs to 1, and you adjust the run game to fit that one running back.
Yeah.
Those they don't have those cards to play this year. Yeah. It feels like there's significantly less they can do to adjust right now, and it's going to have to just come down to them just being better.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's this was so disheartening, I guess, if you're an Oklahoma State fan. Because, whenever they lost to South Alabama, there were clear things like, okay, got to stop playing 3 quarterbacks, give Ollie the ball, and then that's what happened moving forward. And with this, it's like, well, you're still going to want to play Ollie. You've got all these experienced offensive linemen, and you just can't figure out a way to run the ball. So I think I think if there is, I'm again, trying not to overreact. Utah's a good team, but if there is, like, a big concern, it's that, like, hey, this team is all back, and it's just not going well.
Right, yeah. Feels very odd to see it going this way after the way things went with all these same guys last year. All right, I think that means it's time for the Stone Cloud 6-pack. We will get that rolling and start right where we left off. Ollie Gordon, who for the season I believe is averaging 3.4 yards per carry.
Somewhere in there.
I'm going to bump it up this week to try to test this. Will Ollie Gordon average over or under 4.0 yards per carry at Kansas State?
It's interesting because he just needs one. I feel like that could open up a lot of things. If he can just get one going, it kind of has that feeling. But I've had little evidence to back that up, so No, I'm still going to say over. I think he maybe busts one out, and even if the rest of the day kind of stinks, I think it's just the law of averages. This guy's got to get going at some time. So I'll say over, but I'm not confident in it, if that means anything.
I'm staying on the underside of this one. I just like I said, literally one 50-yard run is probably going to be good enough to get him to that number. And when they get a chance against, as Gundy likes to say, a half-man disadvantage, they've been able to get some 6, 7, 8, 10-yard runs. I just don't know. This Kansas State team is they just seem very fundamentally sound. Always, which is so weird to me because it still feels like a Bill Snyder team to me, even though it's Chris Kleinman's in like his 5th year or something now. I've lost track how long he's actually been there. But
they've done a good job of like somehow keeping culture through a coaching change, which I think, especially in the modern transfer portal world, that's tough to do. But I think I think they made the perfect hire whenever they got
yes, absolutely. All right, round 2 of the Stone Cloud 6-pack. Brendan Presley, over or under 9 catches this week?
Well, first of all, I hope he's doing all right. That was a scary situation at the end of that game.
That was scary.
I'd like to think that everybody, he went through the proper channels of getting back on the field. And then I put this in thoughts. I don't remember the numbers, but Ollie Gordon and Brendan Presley combined for the first 3 games for it was near 40 touches a game, and they had 21. Some of that has to do with they didn't get a ton of plays because they kept going 3 and out. Right. But yeah, I think there's got to be a way where you just force feed those 2 guys, and if the running game is still the running game, that leaves Brendan Presley. So what was the number, 9.5?
9.
9, just straight 9. I'll take the over. I'll take the over. Do kick returns count on that? Just return
No. Okay. I should have clarified.
Okay.
Receptions. I just said receptions. So no. No rushing. No returns.
So then in that case,
only.
I'm going to go under.
Okay.
I'm going to go under in that case. I think that they've been running him about once a game. I think that'll probably see an uptick just based on they've got to find something to do with the running game. But yeah, for that reason, then I think I'll take the under.
They went strictly with Gavin Freeman on kickoff return.
It feels like he's been close.
It really does.
He's been close, so.
It feels like he's got some good vision, and it's just a moment of time before he breaks one. And that's a fantastic way to lead me into.
Did you go over and under on?
No, I'm going over. Okay. I see double digits catches for Brendan Presley in this one. But perfect lead in by you. Because you're a pro at this.
Totally accident.
Into the next question. True or false, OSU will score a special teams touchdown? And the thing that inspired this and partially inspired the rest of the Stone Cloud 6-pack was thinking about Sean Snyder. Obviously was special teams guy at Kansas State, punter back in the day, special teams guy for his dad for years. And Gundy has always gushed about how they ran special teams under Bill Snyder. So now Sean Snyder, obviously at Oklahoma State, Gundy talked about how much he loves his philosophies on that in that aspect of the game. So, will they score a special teams touchdown this week?
I do think that they are close. But with that said, I think Kansas State probably on alert in terms of the return game. Just that was a crazy play, that punt return that BYU pulled off against them. That's not a normal punt return where the guy watches it bounce over him and then runs and chases it down and starts running the other way. So, but I think that's going to be drilled so heavily this week that I'm probably going to say under. But with that said, I think Gavin Freeman is close. I think it's only a matter of time before he gets one. But I'm going to say no for this week.
I'm going a slightly different direction.
Okay.
I think they're going to block one and turn that into a touchdown. That's where I think it's coming. So I'm going true. They will score a special teams touchdown. All right, so that brings us to the draft of the back half of the Stone Cloud 6-pack. As I mentioned, Sean Snyder was partial inspiration for this. We also talked about Gunnar Gundy today and the crazy game that he had. Attempted 74 passes, threw for 454 yards. Led another victory for the Hornets up at Emporia State, 4-0.
Not enough Hornets out there, I don't think.
Not enough.
It sounds mean.
It absolutely does. It sounds way more mean than any of the other bee wasp names.
Wasp sounds kind of mean too. Bee is, they're almost the most regular of them. But
exactly.
But
yes.
Hornet. There needs to be more Hornets out there.
I agree. So the category for this draft is famous father-son duos. Obviously, Mike Snyder, Sean Snyder, Mike Gundy. Gunnar Gundy, or any of the other Gundy boys that you want to select. But that is our duo. I initially was focusing only on the sons, but you brought up a good point. Should it be the father, the son, the combo? So it's all wide open If you want to pick a duo, if there's just one that you really like and you want to emphasize that guy, it's all on the table. And the first pick of the draft is to you, Marshall Scott.
I was a little worried because, like in some of my research, either the son or the father just like wasn't nearly as famous as.
Right. Yeah.
But there's a couple of different ways you can go with this family. I'm gonna go with Archie and Peyton Manning. I love Peyton Manning. You're a Colts guy. I'm gonna go home and watch the Manning cast tonight.
Yeah.
You know that I'm a big basketball guy. There's a couple basketball guys that I was perhaps after. But knowing that you were a Colts guy, it's sort of strategic in that way. It's needed Peyton Manning.
It's a smart pick. It is absolutely a smart pick. That scrambles my whole draft board because I wasn't anticipating that at all, because that's absolutely where I was going with my first pick. My favorite player. I got to meet him. He actually came. My last year on the high school beat at the Oklahoman, we had a big banquet at the end of the year for all of our players of the year and such. And this is when newspapers still spent money on things like this. We paid Peyton Manning to come and speak to the high school award winners. And as part of that, there was like a limit to how many photos he would pose for, but I got to be on the list and got to meet him and thank him for coming, and still have the photo on my wall.
Yeah, I've started liking him almost more post his playing career just because he's so entertaining.
He absolutely is.
I wish the Manning cast for Monday Night Football would just be him and Eli. And I understand that they're not in the same space, but I wish they were just together.
Right.
No guests. I just want these two ginormous football brains talking about football.
Yes.
And he's been so much fun post-playing career even.
Absolutely. Like just every now and then, I wish they would do that. I realize that they have to be split up. Just every now and then, just go to one place, sit on the same couch, and just talk ball.
Absolutely.
I'm right there with you. Oh man. All right. Well, I'm going to shift gears and go to baseball, to another favorite of mine who was one of the greatest baseball players of my youth, and I'm going to go with Ken Griffey Jr. and obviously Ken Griffey Sr., who. His career was mostly done by the time I was paying any attention to him, but he was a lot of fun to watch, and Junior was fantastic, and I'll always remember the clip. It actually started circulating recently again on social media, where they're playing left and center field together in Seattle, and Dad's over there calling for a fly ball, and son runs over and catches it right in front of him, and they run off laughing. It was a fantastic moment, but I loved Griffey Jr. back in the day. Would wear my hat backwards to batting practice because of him. I usually got yelled at and told to turn it around. But anyway.
Yeah, I'm not a big baseball guy. You know this about me, but Ken Griffey Jr. was just cool.
Absolutely.
So yeah, he was actually on my list, despite me not being a big baseball guy, just because Ken Griffey Jr. was just so cool. I didn't know a ton of Ken Griffey Sr. A little too young for that, but yeah, Ken Griffey Jr. he made baseball cool. And I think baseball is starting to get cool again. So
a little bit.
I think Shohei is a big part of that. I think
it's
baseball's maybe getting cool again, which is obviously great for the sport.
Absolutely. All right, round two, back to you in the famous father-son draft.
Well, then I'm going to go, this was at the top of my list, but I knew that I needed to get Peyton Manning off the board. Wardell Curry, Stephen Curry.
Very nice.
So I'm going to go Steph Curry. Changed the game of basketball. As far as GOAT debates, I'm not going to put Steph Curry in that GOAT debate, but I think he physically changed how basketball is played, which I think is perhaps cooler than being, the greatest of all time in certain things. Like you think of Trae Young. Trae Young doesn't exist if Steph Curry doesn't exist.
No.
So, I was trying to explain that to my wife the other day, who doesn't understand sports at all. And I was like, you don't understand. This guy changed basketball. So, great player. Changed the game. Steph Curry's my number 2 pick.
I had a feeling you would take him. I had him on the very bottom of my list. Kind of anticipated that, but I did have him on my list, partially because of that, partially because back in the early 90s, there was a Nintendo game which I can't remember. It wasn't Double Dribble. It was after Double Dribble, but it was I think the first one that really had actual NBA players involved, and they had the Hornets when Dell Curry was playing. And I loved it because he was such a great three-point shooter, so I would always get the Hornets and just fire from deep with him on the outside. So I was a big fan of him from then, and then Steph was just a blast to watch, over all the way back to Davidson. So
I've forgiven him for all the heartbreak that he's given me over the years. KD, we're still working on it.
Right.
Still working on it with Kevin Durant. I've forgiven Steph Curry.
I understand. All right, well, with my second pick, oh man. Gosh, this list is getting a little bit tricky here. I'm going to go I'm going to go away from sports for this one. You mentioned this one, and I got nervous that you were actually going to pick him, but I'm going with Ben and Jerry Stiller.
Okay.
Mostly for Jerry because I'm a huge Seinfeld guy, and he was obviously fantastic on that show. But Ben has done a lot of stuff that I've really enjoyed as well. My son was really into the Night at the Museum movies.
Those great movies.
Absolutely fantastic. So I watched those over and over again through a lot of his younger years. So big fan of both of those guys. So I'll go with the Stillers. Jerry and Ben.
Yeah, I'd seen, we talked about this a little bit before, I'd seen Jerry on stuff, but didn't know that he was Ben Stiller's dad, I don't think. So yeah, I like you, or like your son, enjoy Night at the Museum. I think that's a solid pick.
Absolutely. All right, last round, back over to you, Marshall, for your final pick.
Okay.
Father-son draft.
I think I'm going to go with Clay Matthews.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Big Packers fan. I've always been more of an A.J. Hawk guy than a Clay Matthews guy. They both were essentially the same person in my childhood. Linebacker with long blonde hair.
Right.
Always liked A.J. Hawk a little more, but he doesn't have a famous father. Sorry. Right. I think his father's name is Pistol Hawk. Yeah, that gets mentioned a little bit. But yeah, Clay Matthews. Dad played in the NFL. He played in the NFL. Had a stretch there of 2 or 3 years where he was like the best linebacker in football.
Oh, absolutely.
Kind of fell off a cliff after that point. But yeah, as a Packers fan and owner, I felt like it was my duty to pick Clay Matthews.
Absolutely, I can absolutely understand that one. Fantastic pick. And to finish it up, just a couple of that were on my list that I bailed on. Christian and Ed McCaffrey.
Yep.
Patrick and Pat Mahomes.
Yeah. I wasn't sure that Pat Mahomes' dad was famous, and that was kind of like whenever I asked.
That's absolutely a fair point. Now, I mean, I was a baseball nut during. I still am, but I was particularly strong during his playing career in the Major League Baseball. So I was very familiar with him. So, but I can understand from non-baseball people or people who just weren't paying attention back then how that would be a little bit borderline. Fun story, I got a Patrick Mahomes Kansas City Royals bobblehead this summer.
And this is the older Pat Mahomes.
No.
This is the younger Pat Mahomes.
This is the
okay,
Kansas
that makes
City
sense,
Chiefs quarterback.
Because Kansas City.
Yes,
Okay.
And he went and played like a charity softball game and dressed in all Royals gear, and they made a bobblehead out of it and gave it away when the Cubs were playing by chance, and I just happened to be there.
I think it's cool that Pat Mahomes has just said, hello, I'm Kansas City now.
Right.
Not being from the city, I think it's cool that he's just bought in so much there.
Exactly. And but with that, another one that I really wanted to pick was Emilio Estevez, whose father is Martin Sheen. That was mostly for Mighty Ducks stuff. But
Ducks fly together.
That's exactly right. But I am going to go with to my NASCAR roots, which I don't talk about a lot. Okay. And go with Dale Earnhart and Dale Jr. I wasn't a huge Earnhardt Jr. fan during his driving days until toward the end, and then I really love him on TV. He's been great as a broadcaster, I think. And Dale Sr. I didn't really. It was before I really got deep into NASCAR. I was actually working a weekend shift at the Sports Animal back in college, and the day that he died, and I had never gotten, like, nobody calls up there on the weekend because it's like ESPN radio that's playing, nobody calls. And once word started getting out that Earnhardt had died, I never got so many calls from sad grown men just wanting to talk about it or find out if it was true or whatever it was. And I realized then how big a deal this was, that he was essentially the Michael Jordan of NASCAR. So that always had a big impact on me as I became a fan of the sport later on.
Yeah,
so,
not a big NASCAR guy, but like Formula One, Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s got a podcast, and every once in a while they'll get into some discussions whether ex-NASCAR driver can talk Formula One, and those clips will show up on my YouTube, so I'll go and watch it. And yeah, I've really liked his podcast. I think there was one that he's talking about an ice bath that he's taking. It was just hilarious. So I think that's a solid pick. That was definitely. I was definitely on my list. I just wasn't a big enough NASCAR guy to go too deep in it, but I think that was a good pick.
I've always we don't have to get into your Formula One love, but I've always been fascinated by that.
Yeah, well, Daniel Ricciardo, who is my favorite driver, it looks like he's going to be retiring in the middle of the season. Not great.
Uh-oh.
I love you, Daniel. I hope something happens to where you're still racing.
Is there another guy on deck that's going to fill the void here?
So this has been an ongoing thing, if you don't know about Formula One, for a while, whether Daniel Ricciardo is going to continue racing or not. So I've had a little bit of time to think about it, but I've been trying to hold on just as long as I can. Probably going to go with like Alex Albon because I love Misery. He races in a really slow team, doesn't have a very fast car. But that's probably where I'm headed next, just because I'm more of the personality guy. If you know anything about Daniel Ricciardo, his electric personality. So yeah, I think I'm going to go Alex Albon and just continue to root for people who aren't going to win races.
All right.
Yeah.
Listen, it's really a lot of fun because then when that guy gets close to the front, you get really excited.
Absolutely.
No disrespect to that. All right. Well, that will do it for this episode of the Cowboy Chronicles. Thanks again to Marshall Scott, and thank you for listening or watching. And go throw those score predictions for Oklahoma State, Kansas State down in the comments, and you can win a beer that we'll drink for you next week right here on the Cowboy Chronicles.